Welcome to another episode of Raising Them Up,
our Christian parenting Q&A podcast, and we're your hosts.
I'm Israel Wayne.
And I'm Brook Wayne.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Raising Them Up Parenting Q&A podcast, where we answer your parenting questions. And we have several ways that you can submit your own question to have it answered on a future episode. One is by going to the website for this podcast, which is raisingthemup.org, raisingthemup.org, or you can email raisingthemup@generations.org, raisingthemup@generations.org, or there's a toll-free number that you can call, leave a voicemail, and we will answer your question from there. It's 1-800-223-6567, 1-800-223-6567. So, Brooke, we have three more questions we're going to attempt to answer here in the next 30 minutes. What's our first question from a listener?
So the question is, what to do with a depressed 15-year-old son who is addicted to video games?
Yeah, so I had a chance to read a little bit more of the context of this from a dad, I think it was, who was sharing about this. And one of the things that the son said to the dad was that he feels better when he plays video games. And so he was trying to encourage his dad to let him play video games even more, because it's like a place of escape for him. It's like the one place where he goes emotionally and mentally, where he can kind of check out from other things and he feels better. And so the two questions, I guess, the most important one is dealing with the depression issue, and the other is related to the video game aspect. I think that parents need to take depression with teenagers very seriously. There are so many young people who make tragic decisions because they just don't feel right, and they don't know why they don't feel right, but they feel off. And whether they recognize it as depression or would be clinically diagnosed as depression, they feel depressed or emotionally out of sorts. And there can be an awful lot of reasons for that. Certainly relationships can fuel that, boyfriend-girlfriend situations, breakups, bullying, cyberbullying. There are so many things that contribute to that. But I think the aspect of the video games, there are articles, and if you just Google this, it will come up. If you type in video games and depression, you're going to find a whole host of articles that come up and that warn adults and parents of youth about the dangers that are associated and the connections and the correlations between these two concepts. They're not distantly related. They actually intersect. In fact, I think it's not out of line to say that there's a causal relationship between video games and depression. It doesn't just correlate. I believe you can trace the research and find that the video game addiction actually fuels depression, social isolation, and just a lot of things related to the mood. Just the constant rush of endorphins, the adrenaline rush that's constantly being created by the video game, the dopamine rush, all of that stuff. It just isn't unnatural. And so I would say, contrary to what your son believes, reducing the video games rather than increasing the video games would be the direction that I would head with that. I don't think I would probably say, we're going to cut this off cold turkey, like you're not doing it at all. But I would bring it down to something far more reasonable, 30 minutes a day or something like that, because I'm assuming that this is an hours a day, multiple hours a day situation. But then beyond that, with the depression issue, I believe it's important to have them get in touch with somebody who is biblically certified in counseling and dealing with these kinds of issues. There are a lot of lay people who are well-meaning, and they would try to give good advice. But oftentimes people who don't have specific training in the issue of depression can inadvertently give bad counsel and bad advice, even if they're well-meaning Christians. And so there are a couple of organizations that I would recommend you look up. One is called CCEF. It's a Biblical Counseling Association. I think their website is ccef.org. Another is biblicalcounseling.com, which is ACBC. And these two organizations, CCEF and ACBC, are both full of certified biblical counselors. And there's a finder where you can go online, see if you can find a certified biblical counselor in your area. And there also can be these certified biblical counselors that will do counseling via Zoom. So sometimes if you can't go to them, some of them can come to you. So I would try to find some that are specifically trained in the issue of depression. And definitely take it seriously. I mean, if it's something that's been going on, especially more than a month, I would be very, very serious about that. And have conversations with your teen. Let them know that you care for them, that you're there for them. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't approach this as a punishment. I wouldn't say, we're taking your video games away from you because you need disciplined or something like that. I wouldn't approach it that way at all. I would try to find out if there are other root causes. There could be online influences through chat groups, or even with gaming. A lot of times, young people are gaming with other people who are not physically on site, and there can be relational bonds that are being formed. There's all kinds of stuff in that world that's kind of new and scary for a lot of us who didn't grow up with that kind of thing. And so having those conversations and letting your teen know that you are for them, that you want to get through this together, that you're committed to helping them walk through it. I think those things would be good. And also, I think I recommended this once on the podcast before, but there's a friend of mine who has a really good couple of videos on YouTube. One is called Depression and the Glory of God. It's Dennis Gunderson, Gundersen. He's a former pastor, and it's Depression and the Glory of God, Part 1 and 2. There's 2 videos on YouTube, Dennis Gundersen, S-E-N. Look those videos up. I think you'll find those to be helpful for your teenage son in going through this situation.
And I think I'd say, too, the fallacy that you're actually winning at life that is given through these video games is a very serious one, especially for young men. About that age 15 to 17, there's very much of a shift that's happening in them between being that young teenager, being a young person, to now being a man. And you know how it is when you feel good at something. It's just human nature. Whenever you feel like you're accomplishing something, that you're actually good at something, you love that and you gravitate towards that. And of course, you don't gravitate towards the things that you're not good at. And that transitional stage, maybe their schoolwork's getting a little bit harder. They don't know what they're going to do yet in life, and they don't necessarily have a lot of skills. And so it's easy to take that escape route and go towards, okay, I'm winning at life. I'm the hero in this game. And that's a really hard thing to then realize is not real. And that's where, as parents, you need to have those hard conversations, loving conversations, but hard conversations to say the reality is that you can go on in that for hours and years of your life, and it really doesn't move a needle of you accomplishing anything in life. It doesn't help you get to know the Lord better, to build a family, to build a business, to actually go forward. And the harder, slow, sometimes dull parts of life are actually going to be needed to put more time into, not less, as the gaming industry it's such a time sucker. So I think that's the hard part, is helping our young people see they need to spend more time in the laborious, hard parts of life, but then painting the picture for them. There is a reward later for these things, and it's not always perfect in this world, right? And we have to be realistic on that. But teaching them that applying themselves to the hard parts of life, to spending their youth doing the hard work, is going to be needful for them to actually come out of that depression. Thirdly, I think we need to also realize that if we take something away, if we start limiting something with our young people, we need to replace it with something good. And the best thing I know for when there's depression and there's maybe that self-centeredness happening is to get engaged with giving and serving and seeing the needs for others, meeting others' needs. And it might look like, yes, you are the one spearheading that situation and kind of taking them along. But as much as you can, especially with a young person, kind of putting it in their lap a little bit to make that go forward. For myself, I remember my mom getting my brother and I involved in some downtown mission work. There was like a halfway house that was a Christian halfway house, and just going and seeing the world that I was not familiar with did open my eyes to like, oh wow, there's a lot of life I have not seen yet, and seeing I can help serve some of these areas was a big boost for me as a young person.
Yeah, rescue mission, lots of opportunities, serving in the church. These games that these young men play, they're almost all heroic.
Yeah.
And yet the young men are not doing anything heroic. They're sitting on their couch in the basement. And so they need to actually start doing something heroic, and they'll start feeling more heroic. I don't want to be oversimplistic with that, but I think that there's a piece of the puzzle that is involved in that. And our next question from a listener is,
my teenager likes to listen to music on headphones while studying. Is this a good idea?
Well, I was that teenager who always wanted to be multitasking. I always wanted something playing in the background. I wanted a baseball game on, or TV, or some kind of music that I was listening to. And we actually had a teenager that felt that we don't want to gender reveal here. We're not trying to go to generic pronouns here, but to conceal the identity of said person. This particular young person felt that they could study best when they listened to music, but it was music with lyrics, right?
Right.
And so we allowed it because we thought, well, hey, this young person feels like they can study better this way. I'm going to say now, I think that was a bad idea. I think we shouldn't have allowed that because I don't think it actually facilitated learning.
Right.
I think it facilitated a lot of music listening and
Yes.
a lot of doodling.
Yes.
But I don't think said student was as good at multitasking as they thought they were. And I certainly was not as good at multitasking as what I assumed that I was. And so I do think there could be benefit to listening to instrumental music.
Yes, I think so.
I think that's in a different category. And there's probably research out there that supports that, right? There's some kind of brain science that says if you listen to classical music or certain types of music in the background, that it helps you facilitate study habits, right? I'm sure there's a study somewhere. If we would have done our research, we could have pulled an article that says, see, this is true. So, I think some ambient sound in the background of oceans, or, who knows, there's probably some benefit to some of that.
Right.
But go ahead, give me your thoughts.
Yeah. So I think, life experience, you go, no, that was not a helpful thing. And so going forward, our mode for our children has been, there's limited amount of music that can be done, especially if it's an individual that's studying, an older student that is studying, that there can be some music with no lyrics. It needs to be all instrumental. I once read that Mozart was the best for listening to while you're doing a deep dive in studying, because it really activates the brain cells.
There's a lot of research on Mozart.
Mozart
right?
was a unique.
Makes your baby smart,
music.
makes them smarter in the womb. It makes
Exactly.
Mozart makes your food taste better, makes your plants grow. There's lots of research on Mozart, I think.
Right. I personally love classical music. Bach was my favorite. However, I do understand that, sometimes it's other nice guitar music and so forth that can be used. And so that has been our, piecemeal, I guess, for the children to say, hey, at various times you may listen to this, but no lyrics, because really, while our children have sometimes not understood this, obviously, though we love music, and so there's dedicated times to that. It's not like we're extracting that from our life or something. But when we're going to focus on the words, let us then focus on the words in the music. Israel does a great job with our older ones, especially drawing attention to what do these words mean that we sing. And as we go through our life, like to have lots of time studying hymns. That's been something we're trying to get back into, to really draw what are the meanings of the words. But anyhow, back to study habits.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you have some ideas for just better study habits? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into putting yourself in the right mindset and framework to be able to study well, like lighting and probably eating. I know, protein. If I don't eat, I'm spacey. Like, I'm 50 years old, and if I don't have enough protein, I'm not productive. My brain is spacey.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I feel like our children too, they have brains, their brains really thrive on brain food. Some of the higher fats for children, butter and
So what about
coconut
snacks
oil.
between meals?
Yeah, I'm pretty soft on that. I think there's a place for that. We do really try hard as a family, stay away from all of the sugars and the dyes and additives and all that, make it wholesome food. But, if there's an apple or a piece of toast, it's like, yeah, I'm good with that. But making sure our children have, this is kind of like basic family living, right? To make sure your children are fed. And yet, I'll tell you what, sometimes they get a little older, and you're like, cook breakfast for yourself. And then you go, okay, wait, are they getting food? They're 13 years old. They should have, did they get breakfast? And that's always a good place to start when the child's getting a little fuzzy in the brain. Have you eaten? Make sure they're getting enough sleep. Those are so essential for their brain functioning.
So sleep,
to take
food. What about light?
Light's important,
So there's probably
Sunlight?
listeners who have very definitive positions on what kind of light. We should probably not take sides on that, right?
As far as sunlight or...
Oh, no, like light
bulb?
bulbs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We could start a whole war on, on good parenting and light bulbs. It's one of those, put your comments or put your views in the comments below, I guess.
Okay, well, let's just leave it at sunlight is great stuff when you're being near a window. But, each child is so different. And I have found that a lot of times as parents, we have to work with our children to help them to be teachable, to help them learn. We get so frustrated as parents when we expect them to somehow have good study habits and expect them to have paid attention to their lessons and, figured out how to take the test, how to study. And I find, wait, if I go backwards and say, okay, let's teach them step by step how to pay attention, how to attack a chapter in a book and understand where am I going with this chapter or with a test. How many questions are in this test? So how much time do I have to give to each problem and so forth? I think those are all very helpful. One area I've worked with my young people on, by that, I mean, getting to 12, 13 years old, is shifting towards something called Pomoto. And it's based off of I'll say Italian word tomato, which is how they used to make those old timers. I don't know if you remember those kind that you'd wind up. None of us have those anymore. We have watches that...
Oh, the little white ones with the dial, and then it would ring.
Yeah, but these were actually look like tomatoes.
Oh.
Anyways, the whole point has to do with timing and to help our young people get into a better, really studying and paying attention. There's a thought that if you start with 25 minutes of intense study time, and then you do a 5-minute quick break, really quick. Go get a drink of water, do some jumping jacks. And then you go for a second time of that 25 minutes of intense study. And of course, this takes a child a while to really delve into and get into that kind of mode. But you're calling for their attention 25 minutes. You're not saying 3 hours or 6 hours. You're just saying 25 minutes. Then another 5-minute break. You go through that 4 times before taking a longer break. I think that goes a long ways for our children and understanding I need to give my attention, but I'm calling for it on a certain limited basis.
So a couple of resources that might be helpful for you. One related to study habits would be my book, Answers for Homeschooling, the top 25 questions critics ask. And I do talk in here about helping the reluctant student or to deal with some of those difficulties that you may have in actually teaching your homeschool student. So Answers for Homeschooling, top 25 questions critics ask. And then also, I was thinking how this issue of wanting to listen to music while you are doing studying is often something that's accompanied with the ADD, ADHD phenomenon. That highly distractible student often has a very strong desire to distract themselves
and others,
right? And feels that they're, doing their ultimate best when they are multitasking with 10 jobs at the same time. But I have a section in Raising Them Up, Parenting for Christians, my parenting book, where I talk about helping the hyperactive child. And so these two books are both available at the Generations web store. So if you go to generations.org, you go to the store and then you type in my name, Israel Wayne, a list of my books will come up there. And so you can purchase those books as well as all the books that I've written at the generations.org web store. And our final question for our podcast is...
Yes, so we got one that says, what do you do about a 12-year-old daughter who disregards my instructions by pretending not to hear me, just walking outside, etc., when asked to do chores like load the dishwasher?
Well, I think we've addressed this before in previous issues, but one thing I always say to parents when they have a child who is seeming to not hear them is, have you had their hearing checked?
Yeah.
Because you should really make sure that there's not a physical problem here. I think that's the first thing to rule out, get their hearing checked. We have also had 2 of our children that we had their hearing checked, and they checked out fine, but we did some more extensive testing and found out that 2 of ours have what's called auditory processing disorder, which means they hear the sounds. So it's not an actual hearing problem. It's a brain processing problem. And so there are cases where you're saying something to a person and they don't hear it. And part of auditory processing is like background sounds cancel it out, and they just are focused on the background sound. And so they don't really hear the words that you say. And then later they're like, oh, I didn't hear you. So one of the things that our therapist taught us to do with our children, which we knew even before that, but sometimes you're lazy, right? And you don't do the things you know to do, is to give your child an instruction and then have them repeat it back to you. We were actually told with our auditory processing children to take them into another room, close the door where there's no distractions, and say, I want you to do this task. And then usually give them a time limit as well of, I want you to have this done by 1 o'clock, so that there is a specific assignment and then a deadline to it. And then have them repeat it back to you. Okay, what did I just ask you to do? Well, you told me that I need to have, picked up the toys that are laying in the backyard and have that done by 1 o'clock. So those are things that you can do. And then what we found with that is that enables us to avoid that problem of them saying, oh, I didn't hear you. And it also removes the issue of, oh, I forgot about that, right? Because they knew it was a responsibility. They were culpable. They were responsible for it. And they simply did not obey the commands. And as we believe the Bible teaches, in the 5th commandment, you're supposed to honor your father and mother, and to choose to prioritize something that you thought was more important to do than what your parents told you to do is dishonoring. And so it really is a sin of dishonor when young people hear and they know what they're supposed to do and they don't do it. Like the scripture says, to him who knows the good that he's supposed to do and does it not, it is sin.
Yeah.
And so we have to not allow sin to go unchecked and undealt with within our family structure, even if it's our child. So that removes, oh, I didn't hear you, and it removes I forgot as excuses. Just simply that act of taking them aside, making sure it's a quiet environment, and then asking them to repeat it back to you, give them a deadline of when it's supposed to be done. Because the other thing they can say is, well, I was going to do it later.
Right.
Right? Well, if you give them a deadline, they're past the deadline. And then the other thing I talk about, and this goes back to my Raising Them Up book, but I talk about all this in the Raising Them Up book, but I also talk about how it's important when you give your child boundaries or rules that you also give them predictable consequences for what will happen when they violate the boundaries, when they step over the line, they don't do the thing that they're required to do. What is the predictable consequence that will happen? You need to communicate that to your child. And then you have to follow through with consistent application of the discipline, of the consequences when they don't comply. I talk about how to do that. I have a whole chapter in here on that. I have a whole chapter on child discipline, how to get the father involved in discipline. This is a great book. If you've not read it, Raising Them Up, Parenting for Christians. If you like our podcast and you feel like there's some good advice in the podcast, please get the book and buy extra copies for your friends. And this, again, is available at the generations.org web store. Brooke, I know you have some additional thoughts on this as well.
Well, I think something, too, that we learned with our auditory processing children was that having a written word, and of course, this was tricky before they knew how to read, but once they learned how to read, sometimes it was too much for them to really process what we were trying to communicate as far as a command or here's your project or something. Especially, that's one of those things we had to work towards and practice with, even if it was simple of take this book in the other room, put it on your bed, and come back to me, just step
like
by
three
step.
steps, right?
It was usually 3 steps that we were going for. And practice helps to make perfect. Even so, there were areas we wanted to make sure that our children really got what we were saying. Here's what we're expecting. Here's what we're requiring. And a written word was so helpful. And so I'm real big on having a very good outlay for my children of what I'm expecting them to accomplish in a day, having it done by what time zones I want them to have it done. We play a lot of flexible times in our home, but there was a general course of this first, then this, then this. So there's a rhythm to their day. And
that could be like a 3x5 card or something.
Right. A 3x5 card. I always had it on a piece of paper, but it was a little bit funny to me how I'm the one who wrote it. And yet some of our children would not realize that it was me somehow that had written this. And I'd be like, Mom, it says right here. It says right here what to do. And I'm thinking, this page doesn't magically appear from nowhere. This is still my words communicating to you what I'm teaching you and what I'm leading you in. So anyways, I thought that was funny.
What you're saying is like you have some rule followers. If you tried to redirect them on their list, they can't handle it, right? Because the rules say, I have to do this and then this. Right.
And so that's a hard one, because sometimes life demands that you be flexible and change course. And, every Tuesday we do this, but this Tuesday we're returning books to the library. I don't know. There's varieties.
So the goal is we want our children to obey us.
Exactly. Learn
parents.
To follow our words.
Follow us. That's discipleship, right? You follow the teacher. You follow the instructor. You listen to our words. But for some of them, like the rules became more important to obey than the parent.
Even though those are my typed words. But
isn't that true with us and God, though? That's a whole nother podcast. But we're like that. Like, that's what the Pharisees did, right? They were like, we're going to follow the rules, but they weren't really following God anymore.
Right.
That was like a whole sermon thing we just did.
But that's the whole point, is I want my children to really weigh into God's words very heavily and say, I'm reading these words. These are the words I follow.
Yeah.
And naturally, as parents, we don't think our words are that important. Our words are not to that high level, but we still are training them to obey our words just as we want to transfer them to helping them transfer to obey God's words. And so I find when they hit that age 12, 13, sometimes even if we have done well with them, there's a little bit of a bump in the change. And again, that happens, I would say, somewhere between 17 and 19. If your children are living in their home. Because they get to that
age where they're like, I'm bigger than you. You can't tell me what to do anymore, right? And so particularly in that 12, 13-year-old range, this is especially where dads need to take responsibility for discipline. I think they do at every stage, but dads have a certain weight of authority if they exercise it properly.
Yep.
They have authority that mom doesn't have.
And especially maybe with the sons.
Yeah. And I think with both, honestly. And there's just, it's way more effective. I talk about, again, how to do that in the Raising Them Up book. I think you'll find that to be very helpful. Try to read that aloud to your husband, or get him to read the book, but read aloud if he won't read it. Try to get on the same page with this of how to get him back involved in the discipline process. Because you guys have to have a united front. And if you're the mom, particularly with teen boys, you're going to have a very hard time getting compliance when they get bigger than you. It makes it very difficult. And so we'll do more podcast episodes on that in the future. But for now, we encourage you to check out those resources. Again, generations.org. Look up Israel Wayne to find a list of my books there. Also, visit our website, which is familyrenewal.org. And we would love to connect with you on social media. I am on every platform as Israel Wayne. Also look up Family Renewal. When you go to our website, sign up on our email list so we can keep in touch with you, and I can let you know when I'm speaking in your area. If you're interested in having us speak at your church or your event, you can visit my speaking website, which is israelwayne.com, and there's ways to be able to contact us there. So thank you very much, and we will look forward to seeing you next time on the Raising Them Up Parenting Podcast.
This has been a production of the Generations Media Network. For more information, go to generations.org/media.